Welcome to Homegirl Knows Best. This show is about the people, the stories, and all the messy chaos in between. I'm your host, Jen Cameron. Let's get into it.
Okay, today's episode is incredibly special to me. Truly one of the greatest honors I've had on Homegirl Knows Best. Lynne Nieto is the chair of Augie's quest to cure ALS, a fierce advocate, a powerhouse leader, and a woman who knows exactly what it means to love someone through the unimaginable. Lynne, you're a total badass, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you for letting me be a part of your world in this fight. While we talk about the mission and the work, at the heart of it all is a love story, and that's where I want to begin. But before we dive into that, I want our listeners to also know who Augie was. Augie Nieto was a fitness industry icon, the visionary behind Life Fitness and Octane. When he was diagnosed with ALS in 2005, he turned his unstoppable drive into a movement, together with Lynne, raising over $150 million for research through Augie's quest and changing the course of ALS awareness forever. We lost Augie in February of 2023, 18 years after his diagnosis. But what made his life extraordinary wasn't just what he had built. It was the love he and Lynne had built together, a love that didn't just survive adversity, it grew stronger because of it. Are we going to start crying now?
No.
This is why we drink. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the beginning when you were just two crazy kids that fell in love, maybe even twice. So can you tell me about the first time you met Augie in high school? Where was that moment? What was your initial impression of Augie?
Well, there were two initial impressions. One was my sophomore year in high school. There was this fat Mexican kid in the back of the class with this really great laugh. And he was always goofing off. And I was always the studious one in the front of the class and thinking, it's kind of compelling, but come on. And so fast forward, beginning of junior year, I hear this infectious laugh. I can't find the fat Mexican kid. And that summer, he had lost something like 60 pounds. And he was fit. And I was like, cute guy.
Like turning your head kind of like, wow.
And so he was my first boyfriend. And we broke up out of high school only because we were going, I think our colleges were maybe 30 years apart or 30 miles apart. But we grew up in Anaheim. That seemed like a world away. And so we broke up and we were friends. We ultimately married our college sweethearts. And Augie was a bridesmaid in that wedding for me. And then fast forward 14, 15 years, we were both divorced and we got married. And we would have been married 30 years last week.
Oh my gosh. Okay, but there's something about your first wedding night that was kind of a threesome. And
no, that might be an no. So when my first husband and I got married, we got married on a boat, and kind of the going off into the sunset. We're supposed to get on the dinghy to go back to the boat or go back to the dock and get off. And I'm looking up, we're kind of waving everybody's on the boat still. And I'm looking at my mom and she's got this look on her face and I couldn't quite figure it out. And she's like looking and I looked and Augie's on the boat with Michael and I as we go off into the sunset. So I know maybe that...
It's a little telling, Lynne. I mean, truthfully.
I think Augie just wanted to get off the boat. He was probably bored and wanted to go home.
He was just ready to go.
Anyway, maybe it was a sign. Who knows?
What? Okay, so you marry your college sweethearts, and then you come back together later in life. What was that? You guys had stayed friends, though, right?
We would see each other about once a year for like a birthday lunch, and I can remember thinking, "What a jerk!" He's just so full of himself, and over the years he kind of mellowed a little bit more. And then when we started dating again, I was like, "Oh, I remember that guy that I fell in love with when I was 16."
Oh my gosh, it's so funny because I only met Augie after he was diagnosed with ALS, right? And so I've seen the pictures. This is a guy that was a hunk. I mean, he was fit.
Yeah. Yes.
Every, just for context here, you go into the gym and it says Life Fitness. This is who Augie was. He built this company, and he was quite, like, people will talk about personality, but he was also a force,
Yes.
like a larger than life personality.
Yes, he definitely was.
Yes. Okay. So you married in 95.
Correct.
Okay. What was your life like before ALS? How long were you
We
married?
were married for 10 years before we were diagnosed. Augie was on the road all the time. We moved to Chicago, which is where Life Fitness was based at the time. I was working, but it was before remote working was a thing. So I commuted back to California for my real estate management career. And we were like two people passing in the night. I'd go out to California for only 3 nights that he could be there with the girls to make certain we had somebody there. So it was really one of those marriages where it was good when we were together, but we weren't always together all that much.
Because this was a big life. There was a
Yes.
lot going on, a lot of
Yes.
responsibility in his sort of corporate realm, and,
Right.
and he was building something very big.
Yes, and he was
Yes.
on the road all the time.
Yeah.
And loved it. He really loved doing it. So it was good. And we ultimately moved back to California 3 years into our marriage because we thought I had a pretty devastating disease, which I didn't ultimately, but it got us back to California. And thank goodness, because I can't imagine living with ALS in weather. And trying to go out with wheelchairs and ventilators and things and navigate snow and
Yeah.
just
Chicago
her-
is weather.
yeah, a lot of weather.
Yeah. What
So-
made your love unique?
So I fell in love with him when I was 16. He was the son of a oil worker, oil field worker. He was smart, but I always thought I was a lot smarter than he was. I was more book smart, but he was fun and he was sweet. And then when we got back together again in our 30s, after me thinking he was an asshole kind of during that period of time, I knew him when he was that 16-year-old boy. And even though he was a big mucky muck at this point in time, I could still see that in him. And I always felt like I had that special way of seeing him that nobody else could, other than maybe his
vulnerability.
family, that knew him when he wasn't the president of Life Fitness and like one of the biggest people in the fitness industry. And there was a way, it was so much easier to love him because I used to tell him, I'm like, you put your pants on one leg at a time, like everybody else does. And a lot of people didn't know that. And I always felt like I was special that I got to know that.
Oh my gosh. When did you first notice that something was wrong physically with Augie?
I actually did not notice that things were physically wrong. In January of 2005, he was telling me, he goes, Lynn, I can't lift weights like I could before. My weights are going down. So he was ultra fit. So he knew exactly what he could do and lift. And I'm like, hey, dude, you're getting old. You're almost 37. You're just being a hypochondriac and, being the compassionate wife I was. Anyway, long story short, a month later, we went to the Mayo Clinic and he's like, no, something's wrong. And that's when we got diagnosed for the first of 7 times with ALS. So he knew his body.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. The only thing that I did notice is we'd be laying in bed and he wouldn't have a shirt on, and his pecs would start. They call them fasciculations. It's basically if you're ever tired and your eye twitches, that's a
Yes.
fasciculation. But that's a symptom of ALS in some
Okay.
people. So it's kind of saying these muscles are having some issues.
Okay. Wow. What was that moment like when you heard that diagnosis?
Oh, we had gone to Mayo Clinic for a 2-day kind of executive ed physical, and we went Thursday and Friday before Easter, and at the end of his time and all the tests on Friday, they asked us to come back on Monday, and we were in Scottsdale, and we both knew something was really wrong, and we were kind of hoping for MS, which is not a great disease either, but it's not necessarily a death sentence like ALS. And so we went back after Easter with one of his brothers, Dave, and after being with Augie's whole extended family, and he's kind of huddled with all of his siblings and said something's really wrong. And I remember this Dr. Smith, and I remember feeling so bad for him. He did this drawing of the motor neurons and how they pull back, and he could have been speaking Chinese, but I remember having this huge empathy for him having to tell somebody that, and we kind of walked out in a daze. Augie's brother Dave was out in the waiting room. They brought him in, and we're all kind of huddled crying and taking the rental car back to Phoenix Airport and getting on the shuttle, and there's this poor one other person that's in the shuttle with us, and we're all just bawling, and the guy's like, whoa, what's going on here? And it was just unreal. Your head was tripping. It is just like I'm certain a lot of people can identify with that feeling where your brain just can't wrap it around. This is my husband, who's ultra fit, who's larger than life, and this is what we're going to have to face.
If people are listening, I think that a lot of people know of ALS because of the Ice Bucket Challenge, right?
Yeah.
That created so much awareness, and
Sure.
I think that there's more awareness now, obviously. But can you describe, for someone listening, what ALS is, almost in, for dummies?
Well, that's probably the only way I can do
plain
it.
terms.
It's fairly simple. It's a disease that attacks the motor neurons, and it affects the voluntary muscles of the body. So anything you can think, I can move my arm, I can hold my breath. So your diaphragm is a voluntary muscle. You can't stop your heart from beating. So Augie used to, at golf tournaments, thought it was really funny, is I'm living proof that your penis is an involuntary muscle. Like,
amazing.
Thank you,
Amazing.
Augie. But it ultimately kills most people in 2 to 5 years, usually because you can no longer breathe. But it affects your swallowing. In Augie's case, it affected his arms first. So after about 1.5 years, our dear friend Peter Brown was like, it was his penguin phase. He couldn't move his arms. He could still walk. And then it affected his legs, and then ultimately his mouth. And he had to use a BiPAP for quite a while until he was ultimately trached about 12 years before he passed, so about 6 years. Augie was a very slow progressor, and he took everything he could to extend his life. And up until the day he died, his brain was fine. He could still communicate. He was still running Augie's Quest and the ALS Therapy Development Institute, which are our only largest not-for-profit ALS-only research institute in the world. So he did that up until the day he died.
I would imagine that nobody thought that Augie would live that long. No.
We didn't think he would live that long.
Yeah. But what a purpose.
Yeah.
How, after Augie was diagnosed, you went
Sorry.
from, no, I mean, seriously, I'm surprised we made it this far without sitting here crying. It's a hard conversation to have, and, but there's Lynne, the wife, right? Like I met you through Augie's Quest, and I see this leader, and Augie had already lost his voice when I met him, so you became his voice. But after Augie was diagnosed, there's a point where you also transition into, caregiver as well, and in so many different ways. How is that? How how do you get through that time of going, but wait, you know, he used to take care of me and I have to take care of him?
Well, I'll often say to newly diagnosed patients and their loved ones, if you can afford it, which most people cannot. I mean, that's the caveat in this disease is, but if you can get caregivers sooner than later. And my experience, or Augie's and my experience, was that for probably 3 years, I was his caregiver. We were all over the country. He's trying to raise funds and interview people. He's writing books. He's like, and I'd literally be in the hotel room with him, getting him ready, getting him dressed. And Shannon, our president of Augie's Quest, would be on the other side of the door, and I'd like pass him out because he was still walking at that point in time. And it was a really rough time. It was an honor to help him, but you transition into this point where you're a caregiver and you're no longer the spouse. Mm-hmm. And so I would get to a point where I was ready to have a caregiver and Augie wasn't, and then it would go vice versa. He's like, we need to do this. And then I felt like I was failing him. And finally we got to a point, and we should have done it years before, of where we could be each other's loved one again instead of a caregiver. And it didn't mean that I didn't have a caregiving responsibility with him until the day he died, but I wasn't as much of a hands-on.
Yeah.
And we gave us some room to have a personal relationship beyond just trying to put fires out and get dressed, get out the door, go to what you needed to go to. It took a toll.
I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours whose husband also had ALS, and she had told me a story about, you know, she was working and she came home one day from work and her husband had canceled the caregiver that day. He just didn't want to be, he just wasn't going to have it that day. He didn't want to be in the presence of somebody or whatever. And she came home and she was like, why did you do that? Now I have to do all the things that they would have done, and it made it harder for me. And I thought, wow, that's a hard place to be in, where you're in the caregiver role, but you're also trying not to be resentful, right?
Yeah.
There must be those moments.
I think there were times of resentment. I used to, and I will say this to this day, is we got diagnosed. Augie, it wasn't just you. If I would have walked away, then I don't get to claim that diagnosis, but I get to claim it as well. It's affecting your body, but it's affecting my life. And the resentment I would have would be when he would not treat me as if I was an equal in this disease with him and walking by his side. I never resented caring for him. Or I never resented schlepping the stuff up to the top of the hill and, you know, getting the van and the caregivers coming out. I never resented that. It was when I was discounted for the role that I had.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's most caregivers the same thing. It's like, because it is an honor to care for somebody in their last days of their life.
That's that ultimate love, right?
Yeah,
that someone can have for someone. How did you guys make decisions as a team? Was there ever times you disagreed on decisions and what that looked like?
Daily.
This is like, you know, every big like corporate CEO I've met, like there's a drive, it's a personality.
Yeah.
Plus Augie was like a big body guy, you know what I mean? And although I didn't know him in those ways, I have heard a lot of stories about Augie.
Yeah. Puppy dog would not be the thing anybody would say about him. Bulldozer would be more along the lines. He was. There were a lot of disagreements we had. I knew him for 50 years, so I knew, and it might come out as being manipulative, but I knew certain ways that I could not tell him this isn't a good idea, but kind of go the back way. And it was like, well, if your neurologist says that's fine, I'm okay with it too. Yeah, I think he should jump out of a plane to do a film shot for something, one of our galas. Great idea if your neurologist will let you, if he thinks it's a good idea. But had I said no, he would have done it, period.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That was one of those personalities.
I
No
can
means
imagine.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes
right.
means, oh, yes, yes.
What there was a point, a very pivotal point where Augie wasn't sure he could go on after his diagnosis and he thought about checking out. And you decided to meet that moment with love and compassion versus judgment and anger. Um, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because where did that drive to say, okay, that's not it. I'm going to pick up and I'm going to fight and I'm going to go on, because he didn't go on for himself. When you guys made the decision to go on and fight, you're fighting for others that have ALS because there was no chance.
No, there was never a chance for Augie. 3 months, well, we got diagnosed in March, and Augie went into a funk. I mean, he lost probably 30 pounds in 2 months. I mean, just kind of almost stared. And my way of coping was, we lived in a house on a side of a cliff with, if not a full stairwell, 3 to 4 steps into each room. And the day we came home, Augie said, I want to die here. I'm like, okay. And for me, the way I function is like, okay, coach, I know I'll be right back. We'll figure that out. So for me, I was trying to figure out how to get the house to accommodate a wheelchair, which ultimately we were able to do. So that's how I tasked myself not out of the grief, but through the grief. Augie became very depressed. Really wasn't functioning. The only time in his life that I ever saw him really not functioning. And we went to dinner the night before Memorial Day and came home that night, and I was just thinking, oh, something's just not great. And at one point they had put him on some antidepressants, and it looked like it made it worse. And I woke up the next morning and on Memorial Day and like, are you ready to get up? And I couldn't roust him, and I couldn't roust him, and like, oh shit, something's wrong. And one of our daughters was home from college, and I was like, can you take the dog out? I've got to, and I kind of didn't compute things yet. And then I walked into our closet, and there was a bottle of pills that was spilled on the ground. And he had gotten up during the night and taken a handful of pills that were, they said, had he taken the whole bottle, it still wouldn't have killed him. But I knew exactly how many pills were in there, so we knew exactly what he had ingested. And so 911, you show up. And we're in the emergency room, and I told him, I said, if you want to die, I understand it. It's not what I want, but I understand it. And so fast forward a day later, he comes out of it, and I had been sitting, because he was on suicide watch at the hospital, and I had been with him and talking to the person that's sitting in the room, like, because it's awkward. Your husband's there, like, comatose, and they were lovely and nice. And anyway, he woke up. Interestingly, he knew every conversation we had. He knew, he's like, how's your child so-and-so? Yeah. So if you ever go into a hospital room, and you think somebody's out of it, be very careful.
Because they could be taking it all in.
Yeah. So anyway, when he woke up, he said, I don't want to die. I don't want to, obviously with our 4 kids, there was a lot of angst, and our son especially was, because Augie's mom committed suicide. And unfortunately was successful. And I think if Augie really wanted to commit suicide, he would have done it. I think that was just sort of an act of desperation in the middle of the night, is the way I made sense of it. But at the time, I could understand it. He wasn't him. And I don't think it was so much compassion as it was understanding of seeing somebody in the lowest part of their entire lives. And
I think one of the hardest things about ALS is, from the moment you're diagnosed, you know exactly what you're going to go through.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, maybe not exactly, but there's nobody saying we're going to try chemotherapy
Yeah.
and maybe you'll get better. There's none of that. And that's what we're working so hard to make certain that that changes for people in the future that have gotten this diagnosis, because we were literally told at the Mayo Clinic, go home and get your affairs in order. There's not a dollar being spent in big pharma at that point in time.
Why is that?
Because it's a very small population. It's an orphan disease. It's and big pharma is a for-profit thing. There's nothing wrong with for-profit, but it's the money follows the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're making a huge difference today. There is money being spent in big pharma, not a ton, but we've gotten the ball rolling on that over the last 20 years.
So that's a good segue into Augie decided to make a life of purpose. And you guys started Augie's Quest, which raises money for, and would like you to share what the vision was for Augie's Quest and where it was and where it has gone today. And
we were originally part of the Muscular Dystrophy Association. We were fortunate enough to meet someone named Shannon Shrine, who's co-founder of Augie's Quest with
love
Augie.
Shannon.
I
Love
know.
Shannon.
And Shannon's our president today, 20 years later. We became part of Muscular Dystrophy Association, and Augie had great negotiating skills. So I'm going to forget, there were 5 different things, but that they had an ALS division, and he said, look, any money we raise is additive to your budget. You can't reduce your budget for ALS. We want 0 overhead. So we had the entire staff we paid nothing for. Nothing came out of Augie's Quest for the first 6 years that we were with MDA. That Augie was able to direct where the money went. So it wasn't just part of the general funds. And there's 2 others I'm forgetting. But it was just a sweetheart deal that he negotiated. And it was great for us because we got this amazing fundraising team that we didn't know how to fundraise. I know real estate, he knew exercise equipment, so this was just golden. And to this day, all of our employees, all 4.5, were so huge. And I'm not one of them. I'm just a volunteer. So we have 4.5. Our ex-MDA, all but one, are ex-MDA employees that have stayed with us and have been with us pretty much since the beginning.
Yeah.
And
they
they're
travel
dedicated.
all over the country raising funds and setting up these golf tournaments like we do here in the Pacific Northwest, Cure ALS, Golf Classic, and the galas and things. And it's a
they're
lot.
amazing. We call them the small and mighty get shit done team.
I love that. I love that. It's hard to understand when you meet someone with ALS and you see what they're going to go through, how it's so underfunded. And I understand it's a small population, but what is Augie's Quest directing the monies to now? What are the priorities?
So we primarily fund the ALS Therapy Development Institute in Boston, Massachusetts, and Augie was chairman of it. He took over the chairmanship right after Augie's Quest found it, just like he was chairman of Augie's Quest, and he brought in a professional board of YPOers. There's some other board members as well, but and he was like, we're going to run this not-for-profit like a for-profit business and treat our donors as investors and have milestones and run it like it's a business. And I think that's the difference of what we've done there and Augie's vision there that continues to this day. So that's primarily what Augie's Quest funds, like probably a lot more than we should, but until we find somebody else that does something better, that's what we're going to fund, because we want to fund the best research. Because ultimately, we don't care who finds, we need multiple treatments, and there'll be multiple cures, because ALS isn't one disease. It's very much like saying cancer. it presents in different ways. There's 10% that's genetic in nature, but the rest, like Augie's, was sporadic. That you have no idea why he got it. You don't know what triggered it. You don't.
So they don't know what causes ALS.
And 10% in the genetic form they do, because there's a gene, and they can. So that will be easier to find treatments and cures for, because you know what causes it. And the sporadic is it's like you're just throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping something hits. I'm being very simplistic about that.
No, but I think that's important.
It's not as easy to target.
What is the link between how they talk about people that are athletes and military, and what are they finding out about that?
They're saying that there's a 30% higher incidence in elite athletes or college athletes, pro athletes, high. I would say high testosterone, but I think I read something today that they used a better word for it, but kind of hard charging leaders.
Sounds like Augie.
Yeah, a little bit, both of those. He was not in the military, but the military as well. So we just launched a study, we just announced it yesterday, that we're actually going to study those individuals and see if we can see a commonality in that, similar to the genetic form. So if we could see a commonality and say, XYZ happens, let's go after this. So that's the first of its kind, and it's a big deal that and Augie's Quest is funding it with three other ALS things as a collaborative, and I think it's going to be, it's a big deal.
Yeah,
it's a huge deal.
That is a big deal. What is the greatest lesson that Augie taught you about life, love, or even leadership?
Relationships are everything. That's whether it's in love or it's life or business. He was a handshake guy. I remember when we got married, I'm like, we both came into the marriage with stuff. We should have a prenup. And he looks at me, he goes, I'll sign anything you want, but I'm not going into it thinking things aren't going to work out. I'm like, what? Like, huh? But he was a relationship person, and he would know your kids' names, where they went to school. He was a salesman too, but he truly cared about the relationship, and that's why Augie's Quest has been able to be so effective, because his former competitors in the fitness industry, that they would like shoot lightning bolts out their eyes at each other. They were so competitive. They rallied behind him and continue to do so to this day, just because of those relationships that he built. And I saw it at Life Fitness. I saw it at Augie's Quest and Life, and the support we've gotten from our friends and family. That, I think, is the biggest thing.
Relationships are everything.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you one thing, because I had met just the loveliest young woman at the gala last year for Augie's Quest, and she was there with her mom, and she was diagnosed at, I think it was 23 years old.
Yeah.
You hear more and more younger people getting ALS. Do they know why?
I don't believe they know why. I think one of the things is ALS is getting diagnosed quicker now. I don't truly believe it's a rare disease. I don't know about you, but it seems like every time I turn a corner, somebody had, because I'll have my Augie's Quest bag tag or things, and they're like, come up, and it's like, my cousin had ALS and didn't last. I think because people don't last very long with it typically. And I think a lot of families, it's so painful and so shock and awe that when they lose their loved one, sometimes they just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I think a little bit of it is that, but I don't know. But I think you're right. I'm seeing more younger and younger people, and it just, I mean, we were 47 when we got diagnosed, but these kids that are in their 20s, it just...
And their parents, watching their parents. Okay, Lynn, let's have a drink. Because here we go. What has life been like since losing Augie, because this was, taking care of him and the events and the schedules. And even when he stopped traveling, you were still traveling, right?
A little bit here
Right.
and there. He would kind of almost say, "You need to go do this.
Yeah.
Go with some friends and do something." Life without Augie. I have the emotional answer and the intellectual answer. The intellectual answer is I had 18 years to say goodbye. And I, especially in the last 2 years, finally got it in my head that it was imminent. And when he made the decision that he was done, it almost felt like the suicide thing all over again of, I don't want you to go, but I get it. So there was a bit of a peace to that. The emotional side is I miss that big guy and his smart ass's remarks. I miss the twinkle in his eye. He had eyebrows that had their own zip code. I mean, I just miss everything about him. And, but he's always right here. In fact, this is his wedding band and the diamonds from my wedding band. So he's always right here. And he'll always be there and he'll never leave me. So I get great joy talking about him. I get great joy talking about his stories. I think it's hysterical when you hear, like you were sharing the story of what he typed to you earlier today.
Oh my God. Okay, can we talk about this? Can I share this on air?
Sure. I don't know. Again, it's yours.
So I met Augie in person for the first time. It was maybe my second Cure ALS Golf Classic or third, I can't remember. Anthony Carballa came out. He was known for the Ice Bucket Challenge, and he did the car wash wearing a hot pink or red, whatever,
hot pink, yeah.
Speedo. That
No,
said,
he had a full on like bikini top and
did
Speedo.
he?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I only saw the bottom. It's
No,
like
he had a
Kiss My
bikini.
ALS.
Yeah.
And so for the golf tournament, I knew that he was coming and whatnot. So I had skirts made that said Kiss My ALS, right? And so a few of us are wearing them at the golf tournament, running around. And
I was
whatnot.
jealous, by the way. I didn't get one.
I think we need to update those and definitely get you one. So I have this skirt. I don't golf, and so I'd never gone up to Augie on my own, had a conversation with them, and at this point he could type, right?
He could up until
his
the
screen.
end of his end of his life. He
So
could
the
still
conversation would be,
communicate.
Yeah. So he's
Albeit
communicating.
slow.
Yes,
Albeit
slow. So I went up and I said, "Hey, Augie, hi. I'm so glad to meet you. I'm Jen, and I suck at golf. I think my biggest contribution to this game today was my skirt." And I showed him, and he starts typing, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and it was like 10 or 15 minutes. And do you remember what popped out on his screen?
I'm not saying it, but yes, I do.
Okay. He said, why don't you climb up on my lap and we'll talk about the first thing that pops up? And you had just come up and stood there and you said something like, "Really, dude, that took you 10 minutes to type and that's the best you could do?" And we just laughed. And I thought, humor. My gosh, this
we
is
laughed
so
a
cool.
lot. Yeah, we laughed a lot.
Yeah. What was the thing that he did that annoyed you the most? It could be pre-ALS, during ALS.
That's funny. I had a weird dream last night, and it was he did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it, regardless at times. Not always, but I literally had this dream last night and just woke up like, "God, Augie, could you just stop doing that?" And it's like, you've been gone 2.5 years and I'm dreaming about the stuff that used to irritate me.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't take no for an answer. He was a bulldozer.
Yeah. A big, strong personality.
He was.
What do you think Augie would say to you today, seeing where you are now after he's been gone for some time, carrying on?
I think he'd be happy that he has a healthy place in my life, and he always will. I think when he left, he told me that morning, because we're both winners, and we've both fought long and hard, and I want you to be happy.
Oh, I was just thinking about my best friend, Kari. She had brain cancer, and she fought for 18 years.
Oh, wow.
And I just felt that tie in right now. And it was just when we would think it was, oh my gosh, is this it? And then something would kind of propel forward for the next thing and the next thing. And you just see, it's amazing. Some people just have a purpose, you know, and they're not meant to go. And you wonder why some people don't live as long. But this is truly, when you talk about a miracle, you know, or, you know, something more than us, right?
Sure.
That's the life. Did you worry when Augie passed that people wouldn't carry on the mission with you?
I was very, very frightened about that because of Augie being such a big personality, and our whole Augie's Quest team was worried about that, and I was pleasantly surprised. And we actually had a call yesterday for our gala that's coming up, and at the end of the Zoom call, I just said, and I always get kind of teary when I do it, and I'm like, damn, I should be professional.
Yeah.
I just said, I'm so thankful that you've stood by our sides and continued this mission. And one of Eric Heartfelt, who's on our board, said, Lynne, the fact that you're sticking in there to do it makes the rest of us want to do it as well.
Yeah.
And your whole team. And my team is who does the work. I laugh that they trot me around like I'm a puppy because I was Augie's wife, you know. But I'm committed for the rest of my life for as long as I can do this. It's right. B, if Augie would always say to me, he'd say, Lynne, if it's not us, who's going to do it? Mm-hmm. Because we had so many more resources than most people. He had his network of people. He had his big personality. He had all those things that most people don't. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I just always hear, if it's not us, who's going to do it? And now it's not Augie saying that. I'm hearing it as a team, that team that's stuck says, that's us. If it's not us, who's going to do it?
I think that as somebody, you know, who cares deeply, watching Augie pass, this is a hard one, Phil Green, it makes you so angry, so that the time keeps running out for these people. Because one of the blessings about getting involved with Augie's Quest is you meet the most loving, amazing people.
Yeah.
And I told you this earlier today. Lynne, this is why we drink champagne, okay?
That's probably why I'm crying, too.
This is part of it. But I remember that I told you about the first time that I came to the golf tournament with Scott, and I was seated at a table with a young man, and he had his 3-month-old baby with his wife, and he was just diagnosed with ALS. Mm-hmm. And I was so uncomfortable because I was just so sad, right? Yeah. And I almost thought, this is uncomfortable for me to be around these people, and how do I be involved in this? Because I know these people now, and then I might lose someone, and then the next year I come back, and the next year, and then I'm like, oh fuck no, we gotta go. Like, these people need our voice. They literally lose their voice.
Yeah.
And I read that one time, Augie said, something about you became his voice or something.
Yeah, he used to say, I lost my voice, but Lynne found hers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were not someone who wanted to be on the stage. You weren't somebody who wanted all
Still don't want to be.
You don't love the attention in the spotlight. But you do it, and you've overcome that, right?
I see it different, as I think because of having 20 years of being in this space, you can be uncomfortable and still do things.
Yeah.
And it's, so you're uncomfortable. It's not going to kill you. Mm-hmm. This disease is killing people. So sit in the discomfort. And I'll say this quite often to friends of, like you're saying, I'm uncomfortable. I don't, know, I don't know what to say, or I don't know. You don't need to say anything. Just show up.
Yeah.
You can sit in the discomfort. It's not going to kill you. It might be uncomfortable, but.
Yeah. I will tell you, though, that goes away, and it's replaced by this deep love. Like, I've never been a part of a community where, like, I feel so much love, and everyone kind of shares a purpose, right? And so you're kind of bonded in that.
And the compassion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I became involved with ALS and Augie's Quest to Cure ALS when I met my husband, Scott, who was already deeply connected to the mission. His father had passed away from ALS. As it turns out, he had known Augie before his diagnosis, which is just unbelievable. And I showed up to support him, and he's still chairing the annual Cure ALS Golf Classic here in the Pacific Northwest. When we talked about, were you afraid that people would give up on the mission, it seems that it's growing. And even this year, the golf tournament's selling out. And we're not even, we're still a couple weeks away, and we haven't even done all the things. And so I just truly had no idea that showing up that one time would shape my life in the way that it has. And so I'm grateful to you for that.
Thanks, Og.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we got to bring the humor up in this. Nobody's going to listen to this podcast if we're just sitting here in tears.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. But no, I do always say that once you meet someone who has ALS, it is impossible to turn your back on them. It's not. You can't. They literally need us, and it's the cause that might bring you in, and it's the people that make you stay. And
Absolutely.
People like Augie, people like our dear friend Phil Green, all lost too soon. These are the kinds of people who change your life, and their stories deserve to be heard,
Yes, they do.
Yes. So I do want our listeners to understand how they can get involved, how they can learn more. You can learn more about volunteering or donating toward finding a cure for ALS by visiting augiesquest.org. I'll include the link in my bio and the description in this episode. And if you'd like to be inspired by Augie's incredible story, you can find his book, Augie's Quest, on Amazon, or watch the documentary Augie on YouTube. It's fascinating. Google Play and Voodoo. And thank you, Lynne. Thank you for just who you are, period.
Well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time and helping us spread awareness and bring some new people into the fold.
Yes.
So cheers. Thanks for your time.
Yes.
Yay.
If you've made it this far, thanks for listening, and thanks to my guest. Make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See ya!